Okay, so I'm going to repeat what I did in class, and the idea behind this project is to take a day shot, as you can see here, and turn it into a night shot. And not only that, we also need to make sure that throughout the 150 frames that we have for the sequence, at one point the front porch light is going to be turned on. As you can see here, this is a simple shot. The camera doesn't move. There's a little bit of movement from wind in the planters. And the idea is to kill off all the warm color and introduce a lot of cold blue dark colors. Also, if we need to make sure that the porch lights turn on, then we're going to have to separate layers and create new layers sitting on top and at the bottom of this entire composition. Furthermore, we're also going to need to replace the sky. As you can see, this is a cloudy day, overcast. So we're going to have to do something with the sky and replace it. All right, first things first, let's make sure that this first layer is going to be renamed door dash light. And we're going to create another layer, Command D or Control D on the keyboard in order to duplicate. And this one is going to be door dark. So the idea is to have two layers and then switch between them in order to have the light on the porch turn on and off. Let's deal first with the door dash dark layer. And this is all about color correction right now. So I'm going to Effects, Color Correction, and in here I'm going to call for an effect called CC Toner. But before the CC Toner, as you can see here, we're going to work with the exposure a little bit. So I'm going to take the exposure, and right here I'm going to lower down a bit of the exposure. You can see how the entire image starts to get a bit darker. I can also take the gamma, and I'm going to try to maintain some of those dark levels in order to make it a bit darker. So there's the image before the exposure and after the exposure. Well, that's pretty cool. Now we can go and activate the CC toner. So now that we applied the CC toner, you can see that the footage looks as if it's vintage. And that is because of the midtones. By default, the midtones come with this brownish color. So if I click on the midtones, I can now choose what color I want them to be. Now I want to emphasize the blue. I want to choose a dark blue, but not too dark because I don't want it to lose details and pixel information. So I'm going to take my color to the blues area, and then here I'm going to choose a blue that is going to be dark but not too dark. I can now take some of them right here and just change it a bit. There we go. Click OK, and I'm going to the highlights, and I'm going to choose a lighter blue. And the scene already looks like as if it's shot during nighttime. Now I'm not so much interested in the whole environment. All I'm interested in is the path here for the doorway. And remember, what we're doing right now, we're dealing with the path of the doorway as if it's complete dark and there's no light source in here. And the shadows, I'm going to keep them as is. With the CC toner, you can also choose how much you want to blend with the original. So I can just put it on about 16 or 17 to bring a little bit of the original colors back. And now after the CC toner, I can go into Effects, Color Correction, and we'll choose the photo filter. And with the photo filter, we can change the filter type from warming filter by default straight into the custom. The custom will allow us to choose the color we're interested in. So I can take my little eyedropper and choose somewhat of a very dark blue. I can choose it from the leaves around here, as you can see right there. And in here I can also choose the density, which means how much the photo filter will affect my entire scene. The higher I go with the density, the more of this color is going to come in. After that, I can call for another exposure. Let me just close this one and this one. Effects, Color Correction, and I'm going to choose another exposure. With this exposure, I can lower down a bit the exposure itself, and I'm looking at my info window just to make sure that I'm not losing color information in here. So yeah, I am losing a bit, so I can take my exposure and just push it back more towards the 0. You can see the difference. It's very subtle, but it's worth it because we can control how much of darkness, if you will, we want to have in our shot. And I can also bring back the gamma and choose how much of the gamma I want to suppress or expose. So I'm going to take the default of 1 and change it to about 1.05. Very subtle changes, but they're still here in order to maintain color information. So now we can take the light layer, which is untouched, bring it up by click, drag, and drop on top of the dark layer. And in here, I can go back to my color correction and work with the curves. What I'm trying to achieve is some color correction of a layer, or I should say of this area here of this door pathway, in which there is a light bulb lighting up this entire layer. I'm not so much worried about the color fall off. This we're going to do in a different layer, but now I'm going to my curves, I'm going to change the channel to the red. And if I want to bring colors that are more warm, I'm going to have to intensify the red and the green and suppress a little bit of the blue. So I'm going to take the red, click on the red curve and increase it. You can see that the image is becoming redder. And then I'm going to change the green, click, drag, and move it more towards the red. With the blue channel, I'm going to click and drag and suppress the blue so I get more yellow in my colors, but there seems to be a bit washed off than what I'm looking for. So if I switch back to the RGB, I can now take this curve for the RGB and bring it more towards the blue and even surpass the blue a bit. So with the curves, you can see how it brings these warm colors back, and it's also turning the shadows area to be more dark. After the curves, we can now go and bring another CC toner. So FX, color correction, CC toner. And in here, the midtones are going to be changed to more of a orangey kind of color. The highlights are going to be somewhat on the off-white, and the shadows are going to be a bit of a dark brown, just like that. And in here, the blend with original is going to play a significant role, just like that. I can bring my exposure again, effects, color correction, exposure, and lower the exposure and the gamma, because due to the work we did with the CC toner and the curves, we washed off some of the shadow areas. Now we can move to the next step. Before we move forward, I noticed that my color correction for the door light layer is a little bit more green than I wanted it to be. So after the second exposure, what I can do is I can go back to the effects and go into the color correction, and in here I can choose another CC toner, or I can also choose another photo filter. With a photo filter, I can go back to the custom and choose more of an orangey color that will fit what I need. I'm going to increase the density on it, and now we can move forward to the next layer. So at this point, I can lock door light and I can duplicate door dark. So I'm highlighting door dark, and then command key or control key if you are going on a PC, and I'm going to call this FG-house. I'm going to put it straight on top of everything. So I'm pretty much happy with the colors that I have from the original layer. So I'm not going to do anything about the exposure. So what I'm doing now, I'm going to punch a hole where the doorway is using at least 2 rotoshapes in order to get the layer underneath it exposed. So I am going to my toolbox here on the top, and I'm going to select the rectangle tool. I'm going to click on it and hold, and from the top menu I'm going to take the ellipse tool, and in here I'm going to draw an ellipse. Now I'm aware of the fact that in class I did use a test card, but now we have 2 layers with such different colors between them, we can pretty much do without a test card. This mask, I need it to be inverted, so instead of add, it's going to be subtract. Now it'll be easier to me to just take the mask and move it where I want it to be. As I explained in class, in some of the areas where we see the thickness of the wall, then we can definitely just take our mask and make sure that it's showing half of the thickness in order for us to have the effect of light fall off. I'm going to take this and push it over here. I can also play with some of the tangents in order to cover properly that area. I'm going to take this tangent, and this entire mask, and just move it around. And now that I have the arch pretty much masked, I can go into my toolbox and choose the pen tool without the Roto Bezier. And I'm going to draw another mask, and that's going to be a mask that's going to define the edges of the wall. I have a little leaf here, so this leaf is going to be masked out. And then I'm going to continue and fix this mask, just like that. And in here I start to see some of the wall thickness, so I can continue and draw the mask right in the center of that thickness. Now I'm trying to see where exactly the light would fall, so I'm thinking about the directions of the light rays. So now at the corner of this wall, the light's probably going to go over here and here, and I'm going to draw through halfway of this concrete slab and over there, and it's going to move straight into the opposite wall. And in here I'm going to continue and draw the mask and eventually close it. Notice that both of my masks overlap, and with the foreground mask, the second one, it also needs to be under subtract. So just by looking at the effect with the masks, it looks as if light has been turned on the front porch, but there's more work to do. One of the things we need to do is to control the featherness and might be even the opacity of this mask. Because I have more than one mask, then I probably need some sort of a layer that will help me control various attributes in both of the masks together. So as I showed in class, this is going to be done with expressions. But first things first, I need to create a layer that will help me have a control over the masks in this layer right here, the foreground dash house. So in order to do that, I need to go to Layers, New, and I have an adjustment layer. This adjustment layer can be named Controls, and under its effects control I can go to Effects, Expression Controls, and I have what is known as the slider control. The slider control is nothing but a slider that I can connect various items to through expressions. So this slider, I can rename it as slider dash feather, and this is going to be the feather that is going to control the masks. And I'm going to create another one, effects, slide control, and this is going to be slider dash expansion. This is going to be the expansion of the masks. So if we focus now on the masks and the control effects, let me just bring this on top here. And there are the two sliders. I'm going to expose my first mask, and I'm holding Alt on the keyboard. And the first thing I'm going to do while the Alt key is pressed is click on the stopwatch of the first mask's mask expansion attribute. When I do that, it will expose the expression that controls mask 1 mask's expansion. So I'm going to take the squiggly line, or the pick whip as we explained in class, click and drag into, I just need to make sure I open up the effect first, and then let's do it again. Click and drag into the mask expansion slider. And there is the expression. And I'll explain it again what we explained in class, that the way to read this expression is from left to right, this comp, which means After Effects is telling this attribute, look in this comp dot for layer name control, which is right here, dot look for effect slider and read the value of the slider. So now every time I'm going to change the slider, this value in red is going to be changed as well. It's going to read directly the slider that I'm going to change. Let's do that again, but this time with the feather. Now in the feather, we're going to have a different expression. And you'll see in a minute why. I'm holding the Alt key on the keyboard, clicking on the stopwatch, and there's my little pick whip. Click and drag into the slider that is under the feather control. Now, if you remember from class, we did say that because I'm trying to feed one value of one attribute that has a single value into an attribute that has two values, then After Effects need to store the value into a memory bank. So temp, which is After Effects default name for a memory bank, equals this comp layer control, and take the value of the slider under the effect named slider feather and store it into memory bank, which is named temp. Semicolon right here at the end of the command line in order to tell After Effects that this command line is done. And then in square brackets, temp, comma temp, which means take the value that you stored in memory bank and spit it out twice for the X and Y. And why do we have X and Y? Because the mask feather works with two values, not just one. Now I can expose mask 2, and because I want both values on both masks to be the same, so I'm holding Alt on the keyboard again, click on mask feather, and I'm going to tell it take the value of mask feather from mask 1. There it is right here. And now I'm going to expose the expansion by holding Alt on the keyboard and then click. There's my little pick whip and straight into the mask expansion of mask 1. So the way it works is that the sliders control mask 1 and mask 1 also controls the same attributes in mask 2. So if we go back to our composition and I have here under the control layer the sliders, for example, there's my mask expansion slider. So if I open the slider and I start playing with it, you notice how it expands the pixels around both masks together. And I don't have to go inside and change each mask individually. And this is going to be very useful when we're animating the light turning on the porch. And there's the second slider with the feather. Now I'm feathering both masks. So I'm going to bring my sliders back to 0 because I don't want to animate them yet. And in this case, once we have the control done and the foreground of the house is done, then we pretty much can animate the light on the porch turning on. So there's my door light. Let's just take off the lock out of it. And I can go into the transform. I got the opacity, and I can say that after frame 30, the lights turn on. So until frame 30, the opacity on door light is going to be 0. And I'm going to also put a keyframe on opacity, and then I'm going to jump about 6 frames. So I'll just say frame 36, and I'm clicking on the number here in order to bring this go to time window. Let me show you that again. There it is right here. I'm going to click on it, and now I'm saying go to frame 36. Click OK, and in here the opacity is going to be 100. So the light is going to have enough time to turn on. Maybe 6 frames is a little bit too much. So I'm going to take my second keyframe here and just push it to about frame 34. I want the light to turn fast. If we go back to frame 30, then I can go back to my control layer where my sliders are. And I'm going to put a keyframe on slider for the feather and slider for the expansion. And then I'm going to frame 34, and the expansion, I'm just going to give it just a couple of values. It's going to be 2, and the feather is going to be about 4. So now the light has a nice fall off indication. Maybe even, let's try with 8. That's more like it. We got a little bit of light wrapping around the edges of the wall. And I can just go back to my foreground house element and just fix mask 2. And on mask 2, I can just grab this vertex and just straighten it up a bit. We have a fully animated effect in which the light on the porch will turn on in a matter of 4 frames. We're just waiting for the timeline to reach frame 30, and then the effect will be complete. There you go. So the light on the porch turns on. I can add more mask to indicate that there's a little bit of light fall off on these rocks and the edge of the planter here, and maybe the edge of the second concrete slab. I can do that and then just connect, as you just saw, with expressions, the 4th, 5th, and 6th masks, if needed, straight into the second one or the first one. But what we need to do is we also need to change the skies. So in order to change the sky and replace it with a dark element, I'm going to take the footage, click, drag into a new composition button, and in here I'm going to concentrate on the rooftop right there. So I'm going to take this layer, and I'm going to take from my toolbox the rectangle tool, and all I'm interested in is just this top portion right here. Under this top portion, I'm going to effects and looking for my keying, and I'm taking the extract, because with the extract I'll be able to chip off the majority of the blown out skies, those that are pretty much complete white. And now I'm looking at my alpha channel, and you can see how the alpha is a bit clear. I got some noise going on in there, and all I did is under the extract histogram I pushed the point white a bit to the left, and then I took the white softness, which is the bottom point, and I just pushed it away from the white point. So I moved this point right over here, and then I took the white softness and I just moved it straight back to where it was. So now I got an alpha for the roof, but I got a problem because the window that is installed in the roof reflected the color of the sky. So now I got a hole in here. So I'm going to layer, new, solid, and this is going to be a white solid. I'm going to call this alpha-filler, and let's move back to my RGB. I'm going to take the filler and temporarily move it to multiply, and again with a rectangle tool I'm just going to cut a little hole here in the alpha filler. Now if I look back at the alpha, then I can see that that problem was fixed. So now I got 2 layers. One of them is with a mask and with the extract effect in order to cut away the sky, and the second one is just a solid with a mask on it in order to cover the areas that I need to fill in, and I'm going to take the alpha filler and push it back to normal. And now I'm going to take house 2 composition, click and drag into a new composition. So this is going to be my 3rd composition. This I'm going to call this main, and I'm going to change that to RGB. As you can see, I only got a small portion of the house. I'm going to take the first composition we worked on with the color correction and the animation, and I'm going to put it right underneath it. And now, as you probably guessed, I'm going to take the alpha of house 2. Actually, I'm going to call this not house 2, I'm going to call this house dash sky dash alpha. I'm going to tell layer 2, your alpha comes from the layer above you. All I got is just the portion of the roof that the alpha is showing me. But not only that, I can take the original layer again and just put it underneath this part. And I'm going to take the rectangle tool on the layer that is underneath. I just brought it in, and I'm just going to cut a piece, and I'm going to take this edge of the mask, raise it up so I can get the whole picture. There it is. And all I need to do now is layer new solid. I'm going to call this sky dash replacement. I'm going to take my color eyedropper and I'm going to sample the darkest color I can find, which is right here, but I want to have a little bit more blue in it, so I'm going to click on the color swatch and just change it a bit to something with a little bit more blue. Click OK, and I can bring this layer to be the bottom layer. So now my sky had been replaced. If the alpha shows a bit of edges, then what I need to do is go to the layer that is reading the alpha, which is layer 2, effects, blur, and I got the famous channel blur. And in here, under the alpha blurriness, I can just add a subpixel level. And even before that, I can go back to the effects, and under the channel, I have the minimax. I'm just going to bring it before the channel blur. Remember that After Effects read the effects from top to bottom. And then instead of maximum, I'm going to put it on minimum, and I'm going to change the channel to read the alpha. And I can just give a bit of radius to it to eat away some of the alpha. And then the alpha is getting blurred by the channel blur. The last thing I want to do is I want to retrieve some of the dark values that got washed off. So I'm taking my original footage and I'm putting it on top of everything. Now I can go to Effects, Color Correction, and I'm taking the Hue Saturation, and I'm going to lower the Master Saturation to -100 to turn it into black and white. And I want to darken up some of those dark values. So the master lightness is going to be about -30. And then what I need to do is just change the blending mode for this layer. So I'm going to change it to multiply. Now it's too dark. So in order to fix that issue, I can just take the opacity and change it to about 30%. So this is without the layer and with the layer. You can see how it brings back some of those dark values. Your homework assignment, to remind you, is to go outside with your cameras. If you have a DSLR, that's perfect. If you don't, then use whatever camera you have and shoot an object or shoot the front of a house or something similar to what you see here, and turn this shot into a day for night shot. In other words, turn it into a night shot. It can also be a front of a car and it's a night shot and the lights of the car turn on, and I want some sort of an element that just turn on in the footage. It could be a light, it could be a window, it could be a room, whatever you think you can pull off. This exercise is about mastering color correction and learning how to layer properly in After Effects. So again, your assignment is to go outside and just shoot a front of a building, a front of a house, a car in a parking lot. Make sure that you have a bright day so you have vibrant colors that you'll be able to manage while you're pulling the color correction on it. And this is due Monday. So for Monday, you also need to bring me not only your After Effects file so I can see your thinking process, but I'm also going to need the footage itself, and no more than 100 frames. And I'll see you in class.